Johan is a naturalist, a conservationist, herpetologist, and photographer who has contributed significantly to the reptile conservation. He has lectured widely on the topic, is a past chairman of the Herpetological Association of Africa, and serves as a member of the Crocodile Specialist Group, Species Survival Commission of the World Conservation Union, and is chairperson of the SA Reptile Conservation Assessment. Johan has authored many books, including the best-selling A Complete Guide to Snakes of Southern Africa, which has sold collectively over 500,000 copies. Johan is the CEO of the African Snakebite Institute and advises hospitals and clinics throughout Africa on snakes and snake bites, and provides a variety of snake awareness and handling course. And I'm very much looking forward to this talk today. Thanks, Johan.
It's a pleasure. Are we just about ready to go, Brett?
Yes, we can go. That's great. Thanks, Johan. Over to you.
Okay, right. Well, morning, everyone. The talk today is bringing new snake species to life, and it's quite an interesting subject. The question that one needs to ask yourself, of course, is what is the species, and why is that important? So I've got the revised copy of my Complete Guide to Snakes here, and I'm actually just going to read a little paragraph. So the previous edition of this book came out in 2004, and we sold a rude amount of them. And then I decided that it's time to update it because there are some new species and we have new information about behavior and distribution, snakebite, first aid. And it took me about 5 years just to get this back up to date. It is a rude amount of work. We've learned so much in the last 20-odd years that it was quite a task to get this updated. And surprisingly, the previous edition didn't have a single digital photograph, whereas the new edition, just about 99% of the photographs are all digital. How things have changed. So, what is a species? I'm going to read you a short piece here from my book on classification and relationships. The ability to classify things, objects, and ideas is one of the fundamental cognitive attributes of the human brain. Even before we developed a vocabulary, humankind needed to identify what was good to eat and what was not, what was dangerous and what was benign, what was useful and what was not. Classification systems serve to group similar objects or concepts according to a particular purpose or design. They summarize and act as a filing or information retrieval system for our knowledge of things that we classify. However, the classification systems are limited by the extent of our knowledge. For example, in the case of snakes, early zoologists tended to classify them with other long, slender, limbless animals such as worms and eels. As the knowledge of snake anatomy improved, scientists noticed that snakes have far more in common with lizards than they do with either eels or worms. At a more detailed level, snakes are also further classified into subcategories. Because certain snakes are venomous, some even dangerously so, their teeth and venom delivery apparatus have been used as a guide to their classification. When V.F.M. Fitzsimmons published the classic book Snakes of Southern Africa in 1962, snakes were grouped as follows: blind snakes, the Typhlopidae; thread or worm snakes, the Leptotyphlopidae; pythons, the Pythonidae; colubrids, the Colubridae; cobras, runcals, and mambas in the Lapidae; and adders in the Viperidae. To a degree, these features are still used, but early classifications had to be modified when it was discovered that some similarities did not indicate close relationships, but rather convergent adaptations. Let me leave it at that for now. And let's continue. So the first person to probably establish a system of nomenclature of classification was Carl Linnaeus, and he was a Swedish botanist back in the 1700s. And Linnaeus described 9 snake species in Southern Africa. And the first snake to be described, surprisingly enough, was the bergadder, which was described in 1758. I'm going to get back to bergadders as we go along. So this was followed by Andrew Smi, who described a whole bunch of snakes. I think it was about, so there we can see the bergadder. This individual, beautiful specimen comes from the Western Cape. And of course, in the Western Cape, bergadders occur in the Cape Fold Mountains. But we also have a population in the KwaZulu-Natal Drakensberg, another population in the Mpumalanga Drakensberg, and then Eastern Zimbabwe. They usually favor the very high altitude areas where there's still quite a bit of fynbos, but with the Western Cape being rich in fynbos, they actually occur right down to sea level at Betty's Bay. Right, there's Sir Andrew Smi. He was a surgeon, explorer, very, very talented person, and Andrew Smi described 23 snake species. That was 1797 to 1872. Also in the early 1900s, you had Wilhelm Peters, who described 20 snake species, and he was followed by, get this working, by Bocage, an American zoologist, right up to 1907, and he described 12 snake species. There was from Germany, 14 species. So a lot of these species were described many, many years ago. And surprisingly, what a lot of people don't know is even Darwin up into South Africa. He landed at the Cape of Good Hope, and he did a bit of scratching around. The Fitzsimmons family had a massive influence on herpetology in Southern Africa. And Vivian Fitzsimmons and his brothers were involved with quite a few popular books. I think the first book on snakes of Southern Africa was out in 1910, a comprehensive work on the lizards of South Africa in the 1930s. And surprisingly enough, that hasn't even been redone yet. So we really need to get far more done on lizards. My colleague Luke Kemp and myself are just about finished with a book on the reptiles and amphibians of Southern Africa that will hopefully be out towards the end of next year. There's a very, very classic, iconic book. It was revised by Donald Broadley, but Fitzsimmons wrote this book in 1962. And it really was a very, very detailed, comprehensive publication with a worldwide reputation as being one of our iconic books. Currently out of date, but again, Luke and myself are working on a revised edition of Fitzsimmons snakes. And then, of course, the late Don Broadley. So Don started off as a construction worker building roads in Zimbabwe. And he started encountering snakes as they bulldozed into new areas. And then he developed an interest in snakes, and he ended up being our leading herpetologist. And he described about 20 snake species. And what he also did is Don sorted a lot of problems out. Now, again, why the description of a species? Well, quite frankly, if we don't describe a species, we can't conserve it because we don't know what we're dealing with. And the way that descriptions work, we assign a genus and a species, either an ancient Greek or a Latin word. So you're looking at, see what I've got over here. There's a Cape Cobra. So the genus is Naja. And we write that with a capital N, and we write it in italics. And then the species is Nivea. So each species will be in a genus, a group. So all of our cobras are in this group called Naja. Our mambas are in a group called Dendroaspis, and in the species. And the reason why we use these Greek or Latin names is that they remain universal worldwide. So whether you have a Russian herpetologist or a British herpetologist, if they speak of Naja nivea, we know exactly what we're speaking about. But if we use common names, some people might call the Cape Cobra a Cape Cobra, although you do find it in Namibia and Botswana and in Northwest and in the Free State. Other people might refer to it as a geelslang, or in Afrikaans, a koperkapel. But now this is where the confusion is, because in the Rustenburg area where we have snouted cobras, Naja and Olifera, some people might also call that a geelslang because they can be yellowish. So that is very, very confusing. But if you speak of Naja nivea, anyone in the world knows exactly what you're speaking of. We have a pretty good idea of the attributes of the snake, where it occurs, and we can now start looking at it from a conservation point of view as well. Now, back to me mentioning that I did this major revision of my snake book, Complete Guide to Snakes of Southern Africa. One of the interesting questions that I was asked about Cape Cobras, and this was from Dr. Brian Marais down at the University of the Western Cape. He asked me, where do Cape Cobras lay their eggs? So if I go into my book to the Cape Cobra, and I go to reproduction, we just say there it's egg laying. It lays 8 to 20 eggs. They measure 60 to 69 by 24 to 30 millimeters in size, and they are laid in midsummer. And that's about as much as we know as Cape Cobra reproductions. And invariably, if people ask us, where do snakes lay their eggs? We'll tell you that pythons favor aardvark holes, but the majority of snakes will lay underground or maybe in a hollow tree trunk. Where underground, we have absolutely no idea. And how bizarre is this? 21st century, and we have no idea where Cape Cobra lays its eggs, because none of us have ever really found them underground. So for all we know, it might be quite close to the surface. So what we must remember about snake eggs is they're soft and leathery. They're not like chicken eggs. So if the snake lays them too close to the surface, there's the danger of them being excavated by legavans. And if they might dehydrate, they might get eaten by ants. So they've got to select a very, very suitable spot, because most snakes, when they lay their eggs, they abandon them. They lay them, they forget about them, and eggs take about 6 weeks to 3 months to hatch. Well, the average is around 2 months. So 2 months later, the baby snakes are ready to hatch. On the front of their premaxillary bone, they have an egg tooth, like a little sharp bony projection, and they move their head from side to side, cut the eggs open, and off they escape from their eggs, and off they go. And the parents don't look after them. They don't teach them anything. Everything is pretty much genetic. So there you go. We have no idea where the Cape Cobras lay their eggs. Well, the same applies to the black mamba. Black mamba, let's see if I just go to the black mamba page quickly. What did I say here about black mamba eggs? There we go, green mamba, black mamba reproduction. 6 to 21 eggs, and they are laid in summer. They measure about 63 by 91 millimeters, by 29 to 35, and they're sometimes laid in termite mounds. The juveniles are perfect replicas of the adults and are deadly. So this is something else that pops up quite often in conversation, because there's apparently a program on television where they said that juvenile snakes are far more dangerous than the adults because they can't control their venom. Well, that is not true. Juvenile snakes have pretty much the same control as the adults. And if you're dumb in nature, you just won't be around. You're not going to survive. So juvenile snake venom is quite similar to that of adults, not identical, because these venoms can change with time as their prey changes. But it's a similar venom, and obviously the juvenile snakes have a much smaller venom yield than the adults, so they're not near as dangerous as an adult. But yes, black mamba eggs, we don't really know. We haven't really found them in the wild. In captivity, we've had lots of them. We've had lots of females laying eggs. We've hatched them. We've measured the hatchlings. We've measured the eggs, but we just don't know much about them. So this is a very interesting map. This is the current distribution map of the puff adder. Now, if you look at my book, Southern Africa, that area over there, I covered in the entire area. I said that's where puff adders occur, all over Southern Africa. These are all the museum records worldwide that we've accumulated. This is Roberto's map. It's a recent map with up to date, and it's all the museums. So there you can see the national museums, the Iron Naturalist database, the ADU, part of the University of Cape Town's map, the Port Elizabeth Museum, the Song Museum. All these records that we've accumulated over more than 200 years are on this map, and each little square that you see is roughly 26 by 27 kilometers, about 675 square kilometers. If a single puffer was found just near Kimberley here and that QDS over there, we would allocate that distribution to that QDS, and we'd say, right, there it is. Now, you'll see that there are these big gaps where we have absolutely no puffer records. That doesn't mean they're not there. It just means that none of the museums have a specimen from there. But there might be a farmer there that has seen many of them, but we've never collected that data. And for scientific distribution maps like this one, we don't really include pub stories. So if I'm in a local pub in Kimberley and there's a farmer from over there that says to me, no, he's got puffers in his farm, we're not going to put it in the map. We want to see a specimen. We want to see a photograph. So what this map tells us is that despite years and years of great science and surveys, we have a long way to go. We have a lot of research to do still. And we need to get out there. We need to collect all of this data, not just on distribution, on every single aspect of their natural history. So here's another very interesting case. This is the little Albany adder. And this little snake is found right next to Port Elizabeth in a very, very small area. And most of the known distribution occurs on a cement factory. So there's a great danger that as they expand their search for cement, more and more habitat could be destroyed, and we could end up with eliminating the Albany adder. Fortunately, we've recently found more and more records of the snake. It's a bit of a secretive snake, as is often the case. And they've now been recorded in Addo National Park as well. So it is regarded as endangered. And you can see there, less than about 30 individuals have ever been found. So it's not a common snake. Tiny little adder. It's venomous, but not seriously so. But yes, a very, very rare little snake. This is the plain mountain adder, Peters inonata, that is found in the New Bethesda area at a fairly high altitude. And again, we know the snake from probably less than about 24 specimens that have been found since it was described. So not a common snake at all. This is a very, very good example of how secretive snakes are. So this is what we call a yellow-spotted mountain snake. The scientific name is Montaspis gilvomaculatus. And back in the late 80s, Dr. Orty Borquin, who was with the Natal Parks Board at the time, was going through museum specimens. And we preserve museum specimens in alcohol, in 70% ethanol. And he was looking at a jar full of water snakes. And he was looking at these snakes, and he pulled out a snake, and he saw, but hang on, this snake has fangs on the upper jaw. And water snakes don't have fangs. And he realized that we have a new species here. This is it's an odd snake. It shouldn't be in a jar. And he looked at it, and he couldn't really place it anywhere else. And not too long after that, he received a live specimen. And he saw this very dark snake with yellow spots on the upper lip. And he decided, well, this certainly looks like a new species, and we need to describe this. So he put it in a fish tank in his office with the intention of photographing it later. But before he knew it, the snake escaped, and it was gone. So it took a while before he found more specimens. And eventually, back in 1991, he described the snake. And the known localities were from the Royal Natal National Park and from near the summit of Sani Pass. So this is 1991. The photograph that you see here, I photographed that snake in the early 90s, probably around, 92, 93. And since then, we haven't really seen another individual. So this snake has evaded scientists for the last 30 odd years. There was a case fairly recently where a hiker high up in the Drakensberg photographed a snake, I think with a cell phone. And it looks like it could be one of these, but we're not 100% sure. It might also be one of the, might also be a many-spotted reed snake. So here's a snake that we don't have data for. Most of it is at a very high altitude. Most of it is protected areas or inaccessible areas. So I don't think there are major threats for the cream-spotted mountain snake. But we do need to get up there. We do need to find some. We, in fact, need a bit of tissue for DNA, even if it's just a clipping of a piece of scale. We need to find out a lot more about the snake. But yes, very, very, very secretive. Another nice example, this is the Mozambique black-headed snake. So this snake was described back in 1854 and virtually not seen since then. And then a few years back, a lady at a game lodge in Mozambique near Inhambane found a snake in her lodge, and she's put a photograph on Facebook. We have a page called Snakes of Southern Africa with over 300,000 people on, and we saw that it's the Mozambique black-headed centipede eater, a snake that no one has photographs of. So we drove all the way to the lodge, took us about 3 days to get there. We scratched around, and within 20 minutes, my colleague Luke found a specimen. So we managed to photograph it, and we scratched around for another 3 days and found absolutely nothing. So in recent years, we've known the snake from a single specimen that we found at a coastal lodge in central Mozambique. Here's another very, very interesting example. This is Fisk's house snake, a beautiful yellow snake with these dark blotches on it. And Fisk's house snake was described in 1887. And it was known only from Toes River and from Worcester. But then there was a trucker in Victoria West, a man by the name of Kiri Botha, who was driving up and down the roads, and he found a few more of these individuals crossing the road. It's a hard snake to find because they live in Karua. They live underground in burrows in Karua. So you just don't know where to scratch or where to look for them. But then in 1984 or 83, I found two individuals dead on the road near Springbok, one north of Steenkop and one west of Steenkop down the Ananos Pass. And this was a range extension of 600 kilometers. And since then, we found quite a few more. So we now have a better idea where the snake is found. And we usually see 1 or 2 or 3 a year pop up on social media. But again, not the type of snake that researchers can easily go and look for, because it's not an easy snake to find. In my revised edition of the Complete Guide to Snakes of Southern Africa, this is the only image I have of Boyle's beaked blind snake. So this snake was described in 1932. I think it was by Fitzsimmons, and pretty much never seen since then. And we don't have a single photograph of it. It occurs up in the Kalahari going into Namibia, but it's a fossorial snake. It lives deep underground, and it very rarely comes to the surface. So when I needed an image for the book, Luke took an image of one of the other blind snakes, and he read the description, and he created this image digitally. So it's not really a photograph, it's just a digital idea of what we believe the snake looks like. So this is a photograph of a berg adder. It's a smallish snake, averages about 30 to 40 centimeters, gets over 60 centimeters in length. And if we look at the distribution of the berg adder, you'll see that we have the population down in the Cape Fold Mountains. You've got 1 or 2 odd ones over here. You've got the KwaZulu-Natal Drakensberg population, the Mpumalanga Drakensberg population, and then there's those ones up there in eastern Zimbabwe. Now, when we talk of a species, the problem is that there are many different definitions of what a species is. And currently, we are mainly using what we term evolutionary species concept. So what happened with the berg adders many, many years ago is they probably occurred throughout most of South Africa or Southern Africa. And then as the warm air pushed in, and it pushed the fynbos to the top of the mountains and down into the corner of the Western Cape, These snakes moved up into the high altitude areas because that's their habitat, that's what they can tolerate, and elsewhere they became eliminated. But what the end result of this was that the berg-adders were then pretty much divided into 4 or 5 populations, and there's no gene flow between them. So in the hundreds of thousands of years, they started speciating on their own. And having looked at their genetics, we are now sure that we have at least 4 different species of berg-adders, but now we need to look at the DNA and we need to do those descriptions. So historically, we counted scales when we describe new species, but since the mid-90s, we started using DNA. And the DNA tells us a lot about the family relationships and about the species. And when we see more than about 6, 7, 8% differences in DNA, it's a pretty good indication for us that they are different species. So there are other ramifications as well, because now that we're going to divide these into 4 different species, or maybe 5 different species, we also need to look at their venom composition. And it appears from bites, from medical records that we have, that the berg-adders in the Western Cape have a far more potent venom than those elsewhere. So to date, we haven't had any fatal berg-adder bites, but we have had a lot of very serious ones. And in fact, in the one study, we looked at 14 berg-adder bites over 20 years, and every single victim had pain and swelling. The victims complained of problems with their vision. They lost their senses of taste and smell. And every one of those 14 victims, about 4 to 7 hours after the bite, stopped breathing, and they had to be ventilated in the hospital. So what that tells us is that if you have a berg-adder bite, get to hospital urgently, because there's a likelihood that your breathing might stop. Right, so that's quite a bit about the different species. I've gone through the talk a lot quicker than I was hoping to. I just quickly want to mention to you, we have a free app called ASI Snake. It works on Apple and on Android, and it's got a whole bunch of very, very useful features, like species profiles. You see a snake and you think it's a pufferer, you type in pufferer, and a profile pops up that shows you what a pufferer looks like. Snake removals, we have over 700 people countrywide that remove snakes. There's no necessity for anyone to kill any snake. If you see a snake in your garden, you go to snake removals, and there'll be someone close by to assist you. First aid for snakebite, all the do's and don'ts are there. Request an ID. This is a very useful feature. You might see a snake or a spider or a scorpion that you cannot identify. Take your app, photograph it, it gets emailed to us, and we will send you a positive identification of exactly what you saw. One more nice feature, local species. Very difficult to identify snakes because we have over 170 different types in Southern Africa. So with the local species, if you are, for instance, in Hermanus and you see a snake and you're not sure what it is, you go to local species, you press on that, and it's not going to list all 170 odd snakes in Southern Africa. It's going to list the 25 odd snakes in your area. So that's going to make identification much, much easier. Right, so there's the app, the latest copy of my book, a few of the other books. But I think that's sort of, quite a bit of information. So I'm very happy to take questions if anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Johan. I find it heartening that there's still so much that we don't know, and there's things still to discover, and that there's species out there that are, waiting for discovery and description, which is fantastic. So everybody, if you are any questions for Johan, we could go into the Q&A box and you could put your questions in there and then we can get to them. Johan, I had a question. I've heard that there's a shortage of antivenom in South Africa. Is this true?
Yes, let me elaborate on that. Brett, how do I close my presentation? Can you do that?
Let me see here.
There we go. Now I can see what you look like. Okay. Yes, our antivenom is made by the South African vaccine producers, which are part of our national health laboratories. And the process is a process of immunization, and we use horses. So what we do is we take a little bit of venom from a snake, inject it into a horse to trigger its immune system. And then over a 9-month period, we increase the amounts of venom that are injected until the horse becomes immune. And then after 9 months, you keep the horse immune, but every 2 months you draw blood from the horse. And that's why we use horses. They're big, but they give us about 9 or 10 liters of blood. We remove the serum from the blood, put the blood back into the horse, and that serum is purified, and that's the anti-venom. About a year back, SABP started running into some production problems, and it became worse and worse over time. And by the beginning of this year, anti-venom was totally unavailable. Veterinarians had run out. A lot of hospitals were short of anti-venom. And sadly, a lot of dogs were dying, and they still are dying because most veterinarians still don't have stock. It has improved. More and more anti-venom is being released, but there's still quite a severe shortage. Fortunately, we're going into winter, and we hope that by summer, there will be more anti-venom available. We've also now sourced an alternative product from overseas. It has been approved by the World Health Organization, and that product will be available in South Africa probably within the next month or two. So it looks like we're going to see the end of the shortage of anti-venom. But yes, it was an enormous problem.
And these antivenoms, are they specific for each snake, or is there cross-pollination between some of the species that can work depending on how the toxin or how the venom affects people?
Okay, so the SABP are situated in Modderfontein here in Johannesburg. They make, for South Africa, they make 2 antivenoms. They make a monovalent antivenom for boomslangbytes. And boomslangbytes are extremely rare. We see 1 or 2 or 3 a year. People just don't get bitten by them. They're very mellow snakes. They're up in trees, and they just don't bother to bite people. But for most of our venomous snakes, the cobras, the mambas, the adders, and the runkels, we have what we call a polyvalent antivenom, and that is made from the venom of 10 snakes. So most of our medically important snakes are covered by the polyvalent antivenom. As for snakebite patients, don't have to worry about what they're bitten by. You get to a hospital, and the doctors look at your symptoms, and they will treat you according to the symptoms. And I just need to add that about 9 out of 10 snakebite victims that are hospitalized don't get antivenom because they don't need it. Everyone's not going to get it. It's only in very serious cases that it is required.
Right, thank you. Question here from Yandisa, double barrel, is there a way to identify whether a snake is venomous or not just by looking at them? And does the shape of the head determine whether the snake is venomous or not?
So the first part of the question is quite simple. You buy a copy of my book and you go through the book and you see what it is. Sadly, there is no easy way of telling a venomous snake from a non-venomous one. The shape of the head is irrelevant. The shape of the eyes is irrelevant. The color is irrelevant. Get yourself a decent snake book, use the app, look at local species, and always look at the distribution. The distribution is critically important. You know, if you find a 30-centimeter little black snake in your swimming pool in Pretoria, people are immediately going to think it's a black mamba, because everything that's black, people think is a black mamba. So the deal is, black mambas, first of all, don't occur in Pretoria. So they're not going to be here. Look at the distribution. We get them up in Dennerking, we get them north of Roodeplaat Dam. And when a black mamba hatches from an egg, it's half a meter long. If you see a 30-centimeter snake, it cannot be a black mamba. But look at the distribution. You know, if you in Middelburg, in Mpumalanga, and you think you've seen a Cape Cobra, no, they don't occur there. You know, so look at that distribution. That helps you a lot.
Fantastic. Mel has a question about the horses. Where are the horses kept while these anti-venom tests are going on? Is it a single institute? Is it a number of places, or is it one place?
Yes, it's at one facility. It's the National Health Laboratories in Modderfontein in Johannesburg, and all of the horses are kept there. Obviously, they are monitored very, very carefully. There's animal ethics involved. They get inspected regularly, and for most of the time, the venom injected into them are very small quantities and have no effect on the horse.
Great. David Marais has got a question. Is there any information on the red adder bites found in the Swat-Rugans and the Tankwa-Karoo region?
So in the literature, we talk about them having a fairly mild venom. Dr. Colin Tilbury is currently writing up the first case history where a young man was bitten by a red adder, and Dr. Tilbury managed to get records from the hospital, the blood works, and so we know it's a fairly mild venom. It's painful, and there's going to be some swelling, but there will soon be a scientific paper on the effects of red adder venom on people.
Fantastic, thank you. How long does antivenom last for?
So the polyvalent and monovalent antivenom is in liquid form. It comes in 10 milliliter glass vials. You have to keep it refrigerated, not frozen, and it expires after 3 years. The cost of the polyvalent is about 2,310 Rand a vial, and the monovalent worm-slug antivenom is about 7,500 Rand a vial. So just to give you an idea, the average cost of a serious snakebite is around 100,000 Rand to treat. If things go wrong and you need a bit of surgery afterwards, it's about R1 million for a single snakebite.
Yeah. Well, okay, don't get bitten. Tim, Tim's asked, is there any work being done on to review the brown house snake, the Boaden capensis species complex?
Yeah, Tim, that's a nice question. Yeah, at the moment, there's quite a bit going on. There's a lot of bits and pieces where we are looking at DNA of the various species. So historically, we had a single species of brown house snake in South Africa. And then years back, the one in the Maculand with these big eyes was called Boaden mentalis. That was sunk. We said, no, there's just one species. Recently, it's been resurrected. So now we have a bug-eyed house snake in the Maculand called Boaden mentalis. We have the brown house snake. But there's another form in the Maculand that's chocolate brown with a light line going down the body. It needs further investigation. So yeah, Tim, ongoing, but I don't think anything dramatic is happening right now. There's a whole bunch of research. There's a whole bunch of DNA analyses on a variety of reptiles, not just snakes. And the papers will sort of come out bit by bit.
Right. Edward has asked, do you offer any discounted rates for pensioners for your courses, i.e. the same as children?
Yes, of course we do. I'm a pensioner. Of course we give them a discount. Yeah. Just contact me. We'll help you with that. Fantastic.
And then Mel's asked again just to rename the app, but I think Mel, it's in we've got that in the box, the African Snakebite Institute.com app.
Yeah, so it's ASI Snakes. So if you go into your Play Store, you just type in ASI one word, snakes a second word, the yellow app will pop up and it's free. Cost you nothing.
Fantastic. I wanted to, obviously down in the Cape when it gets colder and I suppose when winter, do all snakes hibernate, or do snakes stay active all year round?
So our snakes in South Africa don't really hibernate because it doesn't get cold enough. You know, if you look at the Western Cape this morning, cold and wet, but if you go down an anthill burrow, anthill hole, and you go just a meter or two underground, it's over 20 degrees down there. So in winter, we talk about a state of torpor where the snakes are less active and they go underground and they'll stay there for most of winter. But on a hot winter's day, Gauteng today is 21 degrees. So the rinkels might just come out and bask for an hour or two and go back down their burrows. But it's not a true hibernation of the bear going into a cave and it goes to sleep and its system gets switched off for 4 or 5 months and then it wakes up again. So we don't really have that in this country.
Sunday has asked, is there a platform where accurate sightings can be recorded and logged for various locations around South Africa? Does your app do that, or is that iNaturalist or something like that?
Yes, absolutely. They can go onto our app. We would log those. They can go onto iNaturalist, or they can go onto the virtual museum of the ADU. All of those links are available from our website, africansnakebiteinstitute.com.
Great. Karen, hi, Johan. What makes the mongoose such an effective snake killer?
Yes, a lot of predators feed on snakes. I don't think the mongoose is really that effective. It's just an opportunistic predator, and predators grab what is the easiest to get. We can probably put in the same category as the secretary bird. A lot of people regard secretary birds as these phenomenal snake killers. Less than 10% of the diet is snakes. They don't really eat that many snakes. But what we do find is that a lot of small carnivores like civets and like mongooses are really, they have really quick reflexes. So they're very quick at jumping out of the way, of tiring out snakes. And then, of course, you have inbuilt immunity in a lot of mammals like badgers. The honey badgers have an immunity. Exactly how that immunity works, it's quite complex to explain. But for the best part of it, if a honey badger gets bitten by a puff adder, there might be a bit of swelling, but it's not going to kill the badger, and the badger is probably just going to eat up the puff adder. So a lot of animals have a natural immunity.
And sorry, is there any way to cross-pollinate that across to humans, to synthesize? Is there no way that could be used as a sort of a vaccine as opposed to an antivenom?
Yeah, it's a great idea, Brett. The problem is to get it from that mammal to commercially available product. It's like taking cancer cells in a petri dish, and you put a bit of petrol in there, and it neutralizes the cancer cells. You're a long way from making a viable commercial product. So it's a very nice idea. There's a rumor now of guys, because a lot of snakes are immune to snake venoms. Some people are saying that they can take snake blood and make an anti-venom. Well, yeah, it's a nice idea, but it's not that simple.
Right, well, that looks like the end of the questions. I give everybody, if there's any other questions, quickly get it in. I can see if anybody's typing. Otherwise, then it's just left for me to thank Johan. Thank you so much for sharing your passion and sharing your knowledge and your time with us. And to everybody who's joined us for our talk today, thank you so much. And we will see you in a month's time. Thank you. Thanks, Johan.
Brett. It was a lot of fun. Much appreciated.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.